Hi everyone, I'm Alvin and we present TechSci Research, a global market research-based management consulting firm, and we are back with another podcast. The topic for this session is digital brain, where innovation and intellect come together to decode the future of mental health and how technology is transforming the way we understand, treat, and train the mind. Joining me to answer my questions is Mr. Michael Patterson, co-founder of Cognirise Health, with a powerhouse background in cognitive neuroscience, digital therapeutics, and data science. Michael has dedicated his career to develop evidence-based interventions for both healthy and impaired brains. So let's explore how tech isn't just changing minds, it's training them.
Before I start asking you the other questions, let's start with your journey. What sparked your interest in cognitive neuroscience and basically digital therapeutics?
Yeah, well, I've always been interested in what it is that makes us human. And to understand what makes us human, I guess you can go a couple of different ways, right? You can try reading literature and see how authors explain why people act the way they do, or you can use science, and especially neuroscience, and look at what it is in the brain that leads us to behave the way we do. We do know we all have the same general structure for brains, but there are a lot of individual differences. So I've always been interested in what allows some people to have better memory than others or better attention. Is it due to something that is innate, or is it due to something that they've learned, how better strategies for remembering things or other interventions? So, and also there's technology is always changing our lives. That now we have Gen AI to help us with questions. The big issue is whether it will affect our thinking, our ability to make new thoughts, or even be able to know subjects well when we don't need to remember it anymore. We can just rely upon the computer to tell us the answer every time. So I'd like to investigate the effect of technology on... Oh, shoot. That's my Alexa. That's a good example. That's my Alexa suddenly thinking that I'm talking to it, even though I didn't say anything. So yes, that's technology doing that.
Okay, cool. So let's, in very simple terms, how is technology currently reshaping the way we understand and support mental health?
Yes, well, it's reshaping in several different ways. One way that it's reshaping it is just by giving people a safe place where they can express what they're feeling, and they feel like they're not being judged, that they're being accepted. So that's with all the chatbots now that have proliferated. And then the second thing is kind of the monitoring that occurs. It's much easier to monitor people and notice that there are changes, even if they're, say, Googling for something about self-harm, then they can be flagged, and then maybe someone can investigate them. So these are new ways of technology being used, a couple of ways.
Okay. So just wanted to understand what role actually AI, or you can say machine learning, play in understanding especially cognitive functions like memory or attention spans?
Yeah. One way is that it's very easy to give someone a digital task that they can take it home. They can do a memory test at home at any time, or maybe a test of how they can distribute their visual attention very easily, whereas in the past they had to go to see a neuropsychologist or go to a clinic in order to get measured. So it's made it much easier that way. The second thing is that we're getting a lot of data from many different sources, like how people use their phones or their computers, or what kind of different wearable data that tells how much people slept. And then we can see how that correlates with their scores on these different tests that they're taking, the more gold standard memory test. So that's helping us discover a lot about what affects our cognition.
Okay. So can you help us walk through an example of, let's say, digital therapeutic intervention that you helped develop, or maybe and also help understand how it becomes very effective?
Yeah. So in past work, I studied how playing video games affects people's cognition, especially their memory and attention. And we found that action video games in particular, these games that have a lot of different demands, lead to the greatest effects. They can improve people's ability to detect more items over a faster time period, or even to track more items within the scene. And these video games have a lot of requirements, like being able to navigate through a complex 3D scene, keeping track of different goals and collaborating with your teammates, and then when you're aiming at your targets, making sure that you keep track of where your teammates are and focusing on their enemies. So it's a lot of different cognitive demands at one time there to be able to keep track of what's going on. Whereas a lot of brain training games that are common now just focus on one task at a time, like just memory. And I was interested in making brain games that were more similar to these complex video games people like to play for fun. And so I designed some brain games that people can play that start out very simple, but over time add more and more complexities, such as having to do more than one task, or having more items to keep track of, or more rules to remember that they need to follow. And I think this has a better chance of generalizing to everyday life because it's more similar to everyday life than these brain training tasks that just focus on one cognitive ability at a time. So that's what I worked on developing, and we have used them to try to help people who have mild cognitive impairment, but we don't have enough evidence yet on how well they work. But in theory, they should.
So how do you ensure that digital tools, how should I put it, remain human-centric rather than becoming too mechanized or very impersonal?
Yeah, I think the main thing is that you have to keep humans involved in the loop. So if you just use, say, a generative AI, and it's not designed for the task of helping people with therapy. That's the problem. It's designed to help keep them content. So in other words, they often will just support people. So I think one thing is you have to design the app itself for the task that it's focused on. So there's a recent intervention that's called Therabot, where the researchers used years of psychotherapy learnings and knowledge to train the bot so that it would help people with the tasks that they need so that they can overcome, say, issues with depression or with anxiety or with eating disorders. And this works much better than if you just have kind of a generalized Gen AI, like they use ChatGPT or Grok or something like that. So I think the other thing is just to have humans checking on what the bot is recommending and what the outcomes are, and to keep adjusting. Even some of these bots, like Therabot, are probably made a lot by the prompts that are put into them. So we may need to keep adapting them when we find that there are issues, because humans are much more flexible and can adjust to different situations. But when one person is undergoing therapy, they may have a specific issue that the Gen AI was not trained for and doesn't have in its database. So it's not good at those kind of situations or those edge cases. And that's where it's good to have a human review occasionally and keep updating the bot so it can deal with these new situations. It's never going to be perfect, so we need this continual monitoring.
Okay. So what are some of the common cognitive patterns or anomalies that your data science techniques have uncovered?
Okay, one thing that I find that's really interesting is that we can link personality to how susceptible people are to stressful events. So in other words, when some people experience a stressful event, they might be able to brush it off and the next day they're fine. Another person may think about it over and over, like, why did I do that? That was embarrassing. I wish I could go back and change how I behaved. And that kind of overthinking about it can eventually lead to depression or even more anxiety because they worry about the next time they're in a similar situation that something similar might happen. So we know that personality is important for predicting mental health. So one area that I'm working on now with the company right now that I founded is to try to help people change their personalities so that they become less susceptible, especially when it comes to these negative emotions. What else do we know? We also know that a lot of body systems are linked together with the brain. I think that's becoming more apparent now that we get data from wearables. If someone doesn't get enough sleep, or they're not feeling well, maybe their cardiovascular system isn't working as well, or they don't do as much exercise, that they may also not be as resilient to stressful situations. So it's important to think of the entire body health, not just brain health, because all these systems interact together. It's not just cardiovascular system, it's also the metabolic system and the gut system too, gut health.
With so many mental health apps being now available, becomes very difficult to realize which of those are evidence-based apps which are useful for us and which are just health apps for namesake. So how do we find that out?
Ideally, we'd use a randomized controlled trial, and there was a recent publication in the New England Journal of Medicine I saw about Therabot that was pretty convincing that it's helpful to people. They compared a group that got therapy immediately versus one that was on a wait list. I think ideally what would be better would be to give some people therapy in the traditional way and compare it with the bot to see what the strengths are and the differences. But most of them aren't tested in these types of trials because it's expensive and takes a long time to do. And it's not easy to get people to sign up to have a test to see whether it's going to cure them when they have an issue, because we already do have approaches to try to help people who have depression or anxiety disorders. Ideally you need a randomized trial, and you'd have some type of control group that you compare the results with over time. The other thing is that it has to be long enough, like looking ahead at least several months to see if the intervention actually helped or people relapsed. That's important to look at whether these trials work as well as other interventions, whether these new types of chatbots work as well as other interventions.
Okay. So, what ethical concerns do you consider when collecting and using cognitive health data?
Yeah, I think there are a couple. The main one is just that people's data remains private. If they want it to remain private, that it's only shared with their consent. We don't want data to be used by big tech like Google or Meta to then try to sell them products. That would be terrible that they don't need, because if someone's more susceptible because they're feeling more depressed, of course you may be able to sell them some things or push some things their way. Also they could be vulnerable to losing their job or having people judge them if the data came out, because in therapy people are often expressing their most private feelings. So it's important to keep this data very safe, and some ways to do this are to make sure that you keep the identity information separate from the data that has all of their therapeutic information, all the chats that they had. And then the other thing is to make sure that the therapy is helpful, because a lot of people have used the general Gen AI, and there have been many cases in the news that show that the AI just supports them no matter what they want to do. So if they say, "Oh, I'm not feeling good, is self-harm something okay for me to do in this situation?" Sometimes Gen AI would say, "Oh, yes, it's okay. I understand that feeling is very common," and that's really bad advice. You don't want people to harm themselves. And to the extreme case was one kid who was even encouraged to commit suicide, unfortunately. It's in the news recently. And another one about encouraging someone to harm their parents. So I think these are extremely important ethical issues that need to be considered when using this technology.
Tell me, how can technology-driven mental health solutions gain more trust among clinicians and especially among patients?
Yeah, I think it's just important at the moment to keep testing them and keep humans in the loop. A hybrid approach might be really well, that humans keep monitoring what worked, that we don't just release it and not check what's happening, because they're not really ready to be on their own yet, and that we can trust them. The technology isn't that advanced yet. So I think the more trials we get, the more publications that show that it does work, then people will believe them more. That's really the main thing.
So how do you envision envision the digital brain evolving in the next, let's say, 5 to 10 years?
Well, yeah, I'm not sure what digital brain means exactly, so that's a hard question. But if I were to guess, I would say that one of the biggest things is getting the amount of data that we're gathering, especially longitudinally. So we may be better able to predict when someone is starting to develop the first signs of depression and intervene earlier, or anxiety, and give them tools that they can use to help them in situations so they're just more resilient and stressful. So I think we'll just have a lot more understanding of how these disorders develop and how to stop them before they develop where they're very acute. So I think that's my main thing. The second thing is using digital twins to make a simulation of each person. And what can be done there is you can then simulate the effect of different treatments on the individual and then choose the treatment that will work best for them. So more personalized interventions over time. So it's the first one is just-in-time interventions, that when noticing when something is occurring, stopping it before it becomes a major problem. And the second is choosing the right intervention that's fit just for them, that will be most effective for them.
So Michael, whatever people say, talk, AI is basically, you feed it data, it evolves itself over a period of time.
Yeah.
So the more the data we provide, the more it is going to adapt itself and provide better solutions. But do you think mental health using AI or machine learning can cut across countries, because different countries have different kinds of issues with regards to mental health?
Yes, definitely. There's some countries where it's much more acceptable to say that you're suffering, and other countries where it's taboo to mention that you have any mental health worries. So yeah, I definitely think we need to be aware of cultural differences. And right now, most of the chatbots are made for the Western world and English-speaking countries, and they don't work as well when they use different languages. So I think, yeah, that will be a big issue, is trying to adapt the chatbots to different cultures and making sure that you have humans from that culture and that area checking on what kind of modifications are needed and giving feedback. But yeah, it's not an easy issue, and I think something we definitely need to be aware of, so that's a good point.
Okay.
Especially smaller languages and countries.
Right. So do you think digital cognitive training could one day rival therapy or medication for certain conditions?
I think definitely there are some conditions that are very treatable, and some things that maybe at the moment that we don't think of as conditions. But okay, let me give you a good example. One would be studying. As you know, especially in the US, there are more and more children who are diagnosed with ADHD, attention deficit disorder. And so they're given drugs, but if we could teach them instead some different techniques to control their mind, that might be much better. And I think that could rival the drugs, because we know a lot of these drugs can be addictive, and people may just need them to function in general, and they may not be great in the long term. So it may be better to have these interventions. Another one would just be teaching better study habits to people so they can learn better. It's not taught enough in schools, at least in the US and in Singapore. So there are different techniques you can learn using the science. And again, that can take away a bit of the stress, because people can have confidence that what they're doing will help them remember and be able to perform better on their exam at their best. Even mindfulness techniques too. So I think there's so what I'm saying is that there are some areas, yes, where digital interventions will be very helpful, but there are other areas where medicine is better, because it depends on where the problem is. Like, you can't use a digital intervention to cure cancer, but you can use a digital intervention to help people cope with their cancer and be able to keep calmer and keep a better state of mind and understand what's going on with them, and get immediate treatment when they need it, like if they're feeling stressed out, rather than have to wait a few months to talk to a therapist.
Okay. Tell me, I mean, you've seen AI develop over a period of time.
Yeah.
do you feel AI can even predict somebody who's going to suffer from mental health?
Yes, definitely. As I said, one of the markers of how susceptible someone is to mental health disorders is personality. So if they score high on neuroticism or negative emotionality, then the chances of them developing these mental health disorders are much higher. So, and we can predict personality often from how people interact with the computers, what kind of hobbies they have, often by some prediction, or what they're doing with their time. It's not perfect, but at least there's some correlations there. So I think the other thing is all the technology that's improving in monitoring the way that people interact with their hobbies. Once someone starts losing interest or starts doing accepting fewer invitations from their friends, that might be a sign they're getting depressed too. Furthermore, someone's voice could indicate that they're suffering depression. The tone of their voice changes. And so this brings up a lot of issues in terms of privacy, because if a school is monitoring this, and some schools around the world already are starting to do this, like Korea, for example, or China, and then it takes away a bit of the privacy from the child when they're just suddenly sent in. We think that you're suffering some problems and you need help, and then maybe they don't feel comfortable that way in there. I guess it depends. The scary part is if the school decides, well, maybe this is too stressful for you, you shouldn't do the highly demanding academic course, and let's put you in a different stream. So that's my worry, that it would be misused that way. I think the better way is to try to use it to intervene, but to help people cope and accomplish their dreams, to help them do what they want to do rather than remove options from them.
Okay, great. Now my one final question is, what advice would you give to young scientists or startups entering the mental health technology space?
Yeah, I think for me, the most exciting thing, and the reason I got interested in going to the startup space myself, is just that it's an amazing time where you can have an impact at a huge scale. An app can be downloaded from any country with just going to the App Store and pressing download. And then we can also get data from so many different sources. And I think what we need to do is follow the data and learn from it, learn what it's teaching us. And I think we will have a much better understanding. Right now, there aren't great theories of what changes in the brain when someone develops depression or different mental health disorders. And I hope that we'll understand that better and just be able to intervene earlier and help people so that they don't have to experience really difficult times, and like major depression, anxiety. So my advice would just be to try to be open to trying different things, but also look at the data to see whether it's working or not, and try to test it. Because don't just assume that your solution is the one that's going to work. It's worth trying, because we have the opportunity to try many different things easily by making an app faster than ever before. But if it doesn't work, then of course we should try a different way. Should be open to that, open to failing, trying a different approach.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks so much for your time, and thanks for answering all my questions. I'm sure the viewers are going to get a lot of information. I at least learned a lot by talking to you. So thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you for your time too. It's been interesting. Yeah.
Thanks to all for viewing this podcast. We'll soon be back with another interesting topic. Till then, stay tuned. TechSci Research.